Well, yeah, and the content and the quality. It's not news. It's so much of it is opinion and I can pick out a propaganda piece from a mile away.
You ever watch a guy by the name of Scott Adams?
No.
I watch his thing, and
I honestly, I watch very little news.
well, he's not a news guy. He is a trained hypnotist.
Really?
Yeah, and he created Dilbert.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Dilbert.
Well, he created Dilbert, and
Yeah.
he teaches you how to read through all that.
Yeah. Well, he's got lots of little conservative messages in Dilbert that I like.
Yeah, and a lot of them.
Common sense.
Yeah, I was reading one last week. It said the boss came by and said no, he said you need to every now and then have a few words of appreciation, and the Dilbert guy said,
The boss.
"You're the boss, you first."
Yeah.
Or you're the leader, you first, I think. How does he come up with all that stuff? You figure day after day. I mean, it had to be somewhat redundant.
I just assumed that he must have spent a lot of time in the corporate world, because most everything that he writes seems to be true to form.
It's like that saying, I'm with the government and I'm here to help.
That was
Who was that?
Ronald Reagan, famous, the most, how did he phrase it? Ronald Reagan said, the scariest words in the English language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And I can identify with that.
I can too. And how do we want the government to help us when what's the government supposed to do?
Yeah.
And if you don't want the government to help at all, now we're really in trouble, right?
Yeah. Well, it's been my experience after 7 years in the legislature that a lot of my, if not most of my constituents have collectively more common sense on how things ought to be done than the collective wisdom of most people in politics.
I'm sure it's like my business. It's easier said than done.
Oh, it is.
Though.
It is.
There's probably more hoops.
Yeah, and there's always information that the people, generally speaking, in the public may not be aware of, and there's always what I call unintended consequences, and so you have to weigh those things. And so I tell people there are certain things that I don't compromise on, and those are the basic principles of whatever the Constitution says. I'm a strict constitutionalist, and I'm a conservative, and I'm proud of it. I don't back up from that. And there are certain principles that I stand on because of my faith, and that has to do with the sanctity of life and everything like that in the Scripture. But when it comes to policy, that's all negotiable. The policy would be, should we widen Ocoee Street out here to 5 lanes, or should we make it 3 lanes? That's a policy decision. Mm-hmm. How much money we're going to spend on that project? That's a policy decision. And we can have those debates all day long, and we do.
And we can change it.
We can change it, and we do. Mm-hmm. But there's some things that I won't back up on, and but I've made some policy decisions and some policy votes since I've been in the legislature that I've taken some heat on. But it was policy. It was not principle. Mm-hmm. I won't back up on principle. Mm-hmm. But usually when I explain my vote to the constituents who are giving me a hard time, then they understand the entire ramification of why I voted the way I did. Most of the time they'll say, oh, now I understand. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have to assume that a guy that is intelligent and there to do the right thing, you have to assume he's thinking all that through.
Yeah. Well, and we do have access to a lot of information, and we have a staff that helps us. We have a legal team that does all kinds of research. As chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House, I have a research analyst, I have an attorney, I have an intern, I have an assistant in my office, and then the committee itself has staff people and the clerk's office. And so if we need to really research an issue, we have resources to do that. And then there's always somebody calling or emailing, said, hey, did you know this? And sometimes I'll say, no, I didn't know that. So you try to take all of those things into consideration before you make your decision.
Do you think that, whose job did you take? Whose position did you take?
I followed Eric Watson. He ran for sheriff.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually,
so that's when you took.
Yeah, it was an open seat, and I ran. I had been working. Well, let's go back a little ways. I was Fox anchor and managing editor in Chattanooga News for several years, and then I left that. Mayor Davis asked me if I would come and be on his staff as his executive assistant. Lindsay Hathcock followed me.
Yeah.
And so I decided I was going to retire again, and I did. And immediately someone said, you need to run for this House seat because Eric is going to run for sheriff. And so I told them, no, I didn't want to do that. I was retired. And they said, but it's a part-time job. And you know what I discovered? That people will lie to you.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a part-time job.
Yeah.
What it is if you do it right, it's a full-time job with part-time pay. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And I don't mind telling people, you don't do it for the money. Tennessee is one of the few states that still has what I call a citizen legislature, which is the way our founding fathers designed our government to work. As a citizen, you go serve your time in the legislature and come home and you farm your farm and collect your crops and harvest your crops. And then you go back in the spring or the fall and you serve 2 or 3 more months in the legislature. And that's the way Tennessee is still designed. So you don't do it for the money. I think the salary for a Tennessee legislature, House and Senate, is like $24,500 a year. So
if your constituents in other states, I guess, probably laugh at. Do they get paid more?
Some do, and some actually get paid less.
What would be the least, just out of curiosity? Somebody in your position from another state, what would be maybe the least?
I ran across that recently. It seemed like it was. I was in a conference with a legislator from Alabama. I think it was Alabama. I'm not sure. But I was surprised to learn that they made about $1,000 a month, which is like $12,000 a year, which for the time and the energy, and they end up actually costing them money.
Oh, it's almost ridiculous amount.
And there have been times when it actually has cost me money to do that. But I don't begrudge it because this is at this point in my life, God has given me the ability to do this and to give back to a community and to a state that's been so good to me. So I don't begrudge it at all. Now, I don't plan to make a career out of it like some people in Washington, but I do enjoy serving.
How many terms? You think you'll run 2 more terms?
I don't know. Someone asked me that the other day. It takes you about 2 years to find out where the bathrooms are. And I learned quickly that you can't get anything done.
Now you got to relearn that.
Yeah. And you can't get anything done as a legislator until you build some relationships.
Yeah.
You've got to have relationships. What does that mean? You have to have people who will trust what you're trying to do. Because there's 99 of us, and we come from 99 different districts. And every district, you wouldn't think so, but you say, well, we're all from Tennessee, but we all have different agendas for the most part.
There's 99 of you? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't even know all their names, would you?
It's hard. It takes a while. That's what I say. It takes 2 years to find out where the bathrooms are.
Some's not even there, I guess, all the time.
And so you have to build relationships and people who will when you say that I'm going to do this, you got to keep your word. And if you reach an agreement on policy and then you break your word on policy, they will never trust you again.
You're done with that guy.
Yeah. So you have to.
And vice versa, right?
And so it took me 2 years to find out where the bathrooms are, and then it's taken 2 to 3 years to build a level of trust with a lot of my constituents. Then you have turnover on top of that. When I came in, I get amused sometimes. People say we need term limits in Tennessee. Well, I do agree we need term limits in Washington. But I don't know that we've ever had anybody that served 40, 50 years in Tennessee. And a good example is that is when I came in 2013, there were 24 freshmen in my freshman class. That means that 24 lawmakers out of 99 flipped, brand new ones. Mm-hmm. The 2 years later, we had almost the same situation, 17 new freshmen.
That had to learn where the bathroom is.
Brand new ones. And then the next year, I think this year we had, I forget the total number, but I figured it up the other day. Since I have been in the House of Representatives in 7 years, 62 of the 99 representatives are new. We have flipped 62% of the House of Representatives. Well, what happens to that is you lose, if you don't have somebody that stays for 6, 8, or 10 years, I'm not talking about 25 or 30, 6, 8, or 10 years, you lose a measure of institutional knowledge on how things work and how to get things done. And then on top of that, at least every 8 years, you change your governors.
Yeah.
And so that makes it even more difficult. So you have to have some institutional knowledge. You have to have relationships. And if the legislators are constantly changing over, it takes time to rebuild those relationships and for them to get acclimated. So it's an ongoing process. So when you look at the fact that we've in the last 7 years we've replaced 62 legislators, I think the term limits in Tennessee has taken care of itself.
That's almost like 62 freshmen, I guess.
That's it. Yeah, 62 freshmen.
That know really not any more than you did when you went in.
That it'll take them 2 years to really figure it out, and you can't appoint. The speaker, that's his policy, as it should be. You can't appoint a freshman to a chairmanship because they don't understand the process and the governing process and how the flow of the bills and the committee process and how bills have to be reviewed by fiscal review and
lawyers, I guess.
Yeah, all kinds.
Is it legal?
Yeah,
to do
whether or not it's legal, and sometimes you'll come up with this great idea, and then someone will say, "Well, you better get an AG's opinion on that." Well, freshmen don't think of those things.
They're just mad that you didn't vote for it or something, I guess, right?
So it takes a while to understand the process.
Is there a general respect between all the 99?
There is.
I mean,
there is.
It's like
now we're two separate parties, Republican and Democrat, but I have some what I consider good friends on the Democratic side of the aisle. Now we disagree on policy. We'll debate it on the floor. Yeah. But would I trust them? Yeah.
They're not out to hurt anybody. They're just thinking different.
They think totally different. Now, from what I see in D.C., it's not that way. It's not that way in D.C. I mean, they just
and the state legislature is not as polarized, I guess, right?
No, it's not. It's not. But it's an opportunity to serve. But to circle back and answer your question, I don't know how long I'll serve. I don't plan to make a career out of it. But
are you one that doesn't plan that far out? You kind of wait and make the decision.
I usually go by my gut. Like there were some things that I went in and some things that I've been able to do while I was there that just kind of fell in my lap that have been very satisfying, and I think were needful. So when I reach the point that I think, well, I think I've done about all I can do. I don't want to just stay there, and take up a seat. If somebody comes in and they can build on what I've done and move forward a little further.
I guess that's why a lot of people endorse someone.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to leave, but this guy's kind of thinking the way I am.
Yeah. And for me to think that I'm the only one that can do this job, that's erroneous thinking. There's a lot of good people in Bradley, Polk, and Meigs County that can do this job. There really are. And people who have really good intentions and wanting to serve. It's really interesting to me. I was thinking about it today. My wife and I were talking, and she's very interested in politics too. And I'm fortunate that I have a companion that shares that interest with me, since that's what I'm doing now. But we were talking about how special interest groups and now the media, which I used to be a part of, have painted politicians as just scoundrels and crooks. And if you say that you're a politician or you're a representative or you're a congressman or a senator, immediately there seems to be a negative thought that goes through this person's mind. You can just see it. Mm-hmm. But in reality, and I've been there 7 years, I could count on maybe 3 or 4 fingers the number of people that I served with who I consider as people who were not there for the right reason. Everyone that I serve with are good people, God-fearing people, good family people, men and women, mm-hmm. Who are there to serve. They got the best interests of Tennessee at heart. Once in a while, you'll get one that messes up. And it happens. But you know, we have what's called a representative republic. And we elect our representatives. And what we do is we elect our peers to go serve for us in Nashville. So what happens is the legislature is a reflection of society. Mm-hmm. And so the media will point its fingers at somebody who, you know, maybe they made a mistake or maybe intentionally messed up on their campaign account or who knows what. Mm-hmm. And that has happened.
Sure, yeah.
But they don't talk about the other 98 that are doing it right and are there for the right reasons. But they paint everybody with a broad brush.
And we're guilty as individuals as accepting that as a painting of everybody,
yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's an easy joke. You know, it's easy to poke fun at politicians, and you know, they put us in the same class as car salesmen. You know, I don't mean that as a negative slam against my.
Gotta be careful.
It's true that, you know, they're, as a general rule, we're
a tire kicker or something.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: were you scared the first day you went in? Or do you ever think?
No, I wasn't scared.
Was you starstruck?
No, I wasn't. I was awed. I was awed because the thought kept running through my mind, how did this, you know, I'm just a country boy. My daddy was a sharecropper.
Are you from Cleveland originally? Or
no, I came here in '71.
From where?
From Kansas City. I had a circuitous route to get here. But to answer your first question, then I'll explain how I got here. When I walked into that chamber for the first time and raised my hand to be sworn in as representative from District 22, I was awestruck because I knew that very chamber where I'm sitting and the floor that I'm walking on is the very chamber where Davy Crockett served, President James K. Polk served, Andrew Jackson served there, Admiral Farragut, John Sevier. We're talking about heroes in history of Tennessee. And here, this little old boy that was born in Arkansas somehow ended up in the legislature in Tennessee.
And not only in awe, but thinking, I've got to step up to the plate here. I'm in charge.
I got to do this right.
Yeah.
I got to make sure that I do it right. And so that was my first feeling, and I still feel a little awed when I go.
What about when you first made the first sign that said "Vote Dan Howell"?
A little scary. Now that was scary.
To me, that would be
that was scary.
Do I want to do that?
Yeah. Why would anybody vote for me?
Because you'd not thought about that, right?
No,
But now you're said to be the guy that got the most votes of anyone in Cleveland in history.
I don't know about that, but if it is,
that's what I've heard.
If it is,
or Bradley, the more votes than anybody, which is.
If it is,
if it's half true, that's good.
It's a great compliment if it is.
But that's what I'm told.
Yeah, I don't know.
So now Kansas City, is that?
Well, let me back up and give you a little story how I got to Kansas City.
Yeah.
All of my family's from West Tennessee, McNairy County, Hardeman County.
Buford Pusser.
Yeah, in that area of Tennessee. Yeah. You know where Jackson, Tennessee is? You go south of Jackson about an hour. Savannah, that area, Bethel Springs. My brother was born in Bethel Springs. All my family is from West Tennessee. In fact, there's a graveyard there in Piney Grove, Tennessee that I have visited, and that's where my grandfather is buried, and he fought in the Confederate Army in the Battle of Chattanooga and the Battle of Shiloh. And he has a Confederate emblem on the top of his grave, and it's way out in the country, beautiful little graveyard, and half the graveyard I think is Howell's, and the other half is Hoopers. My grandmother was a Hooper.
Were that the same group of Hoopers? Reckon?
I don't know. I've been wanting to investigate. Yeah. Now I have investigated the genealogy on the Howell side. But I've not investigated too far back to see if we're related.
How about Brenda Howe and Dan Howe from Cleveland? Not Dan, but her husband.
I've not investigated. I do know I've still got a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles in West Tennessee. But my father, they were all from in that area of West Tennessee. And my family was poor, and I was born into poverty. And when come time for me to be born, I was the youngest of 4 siblings. I have one older brother and 2 older sisters. One of them is passed. And so come time for me to be born, my dad saw an opportunity in Arkansas. So they moved right across the river from Memphis, the Mississippi River, into Arkansas in that low gumbo flat country.
Meridian?
No, we were around in Gilmore County, south of Mark Tree, in that area. And that's where I was born. So that's how I got to Arkansas.
What did he do in Arkansas?
He was a sharecropper. Yeah, I was born in a sharecropper's house in the middle of a cotton patch. And so they did that, and we lived there until I was. And as I said, we were poor. We were really poor. You don't make a lot of money being a sharecropper.
Well, my understanding is they didn't have the sharecropper didn't have a right to look at the books of the owner.
No.
He had to go on what he said.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't anything.
And then you depend on the weather and all kinds of things. So you just don't. It's not an easy way. It's not an easy life. Now, to complicate things, not complicate, but it's an interesting story, I guess, to me at least. I was the youngest, and I was the last born in my family. When I was born, my father was 66 years old.
Golly.
So by the time I was a young teenager, he was an elderly man, and he had a stroke. He couldn't farm anymore. So my older sister had married, and she married a man who had gotten a job as a refrigeration engineer in Omaha, Nebraska. And so she prevailed upon me, I was 15, prevailed upon me to come to Omaha, Nebraska and finish high school. Because you're poor and you don't have any money.
Bored.
Bored, and you don't want to go back to school because kids make fun of you because you're poor, because you got ragged blue jeans on. Of course, now that's in style.
Yeah, yeah.
So I moved to Omaha, Nebraska when I was 15 and lived with my sister.
Who stayed with your mother?
She moved back to Ripley, Tennessee, because my older sister lived there. And so she stayed there.
Was your older sister, were they a lot older than you?
Yeah. My older sister was, like I said, my dad was 66 when I was born.
So they left the sharecropper. Now, where'd your dad go?
Well, he passed away shortly after
the stroke.
Shortly after that. And so I moved to Omaha, Nebraska, finished high school, went there 2 years, graduated from what's called Technical Omaha Tech.
Was it a good school there?
Yeah, it was.
People friendly?
Yeah, there was about 1,500 students. It was a big high school. And they taught a lot of technical skills and things like that. And so I worked my way through school working at a grocery store.
Bag boy?
No, well, I started out as a bag boy. Yeah, I did. And then I was promoted to the dairy department. And I was put in charge of making sure all the cheese was right. And if it got any mold, the people may not know this, but if you go into a grocery store and you see a cheese has been rewrapped, it's because it had mold on it, and they cut it off and they rewrap it. There's nothing wrong with the cheese. They just sell it and mark the price down a little bit.
So you were in high school or college?
High school.
Yeah.
High school. And so I finished high school, and it was a grocery store chain. And they wanted me to go to work full-time for them. Well, the problem was I hated the grocery business. It was just,
How come?
I just hated it. Well, it was repetitious. It's kind of like factory work, fixing widgets. And one go down the line, you fix another widget. That was boring to me.
Did you mop the floor at night and all that stuff?
Whatever you had to do.
Yeah.
And so, so by this time, my older brother was out of the military. He was a Marine, and he had settled in Kansas City. And so we talked back and forth on the phone. This was long before cell phones.
Was he a lot older than you?
Yeah, he was. And he was out of the Marines, and so he settled in Kansas City because we had friends there. Kansas City is a good town. It really is a good town.
Matt Dillon.
Yeah, and so we had, I decided that I would go live with my brother and figure out what it was I wanted to do in life. And so
Well, that was a big step, wasn't it?
yeah, I'm 18 years old and I don't have a clue what I'm doing, Kind of like a lot of kids today.
Did he
They're trying to figure it out.
encourage you to come?
Oh yeah, he said, "Hey, come on
Wonder
down."
why?
Well, he just wanted to be with his brother. He was down there by himself and didn't have any relatives around. Just
You didn't have nothing to hold you back.
no. So in hindsight, I should have done better, but I just didn't show up for work at the grocery store. I just hopped on a bus, headed to Kansas City.
You weren't mad, you was just bored.
I just had to get out of Omaha. And the winters there, by the way, are horrible. They're horrible. And so went to Kansas City, and that's how I got interested in broadcasting. What
piqued your interest there?
Well, I was also a musician. I played the guitar and played a bass guitar and did a little singing. And,
what was the songs then?
Oh Lord, my memory's not that good.
Because you'd been in your teens.
Yeah. Well, the Beatles were popular, of course.
Elvis?
Elvis, big time. Yeah.
Elvis was already there.
Yeah, All Shook Up and Shake, Rattle, and Roll. That was in the late 50s, though, but into the 60s. But went to
Mamas and the Papas.
Oh yeah, they were big. So got to Kansas City and trying to figure out what it was I was going to do, and since I was interested in music, I got invited to play bass in this little band, around town, around the region, and we played a few gigs. And
could you play pretty proficient?
Yeah, I could. I can't now. Too much arthritis and too many tender fingers. But one of the band members was a guy named Art Pemberton, and he was an engineer at one of the big radio stations there. And we got to be friends. And I was working with my brother on construction. We were doing building and maintenance and home construction, kind of like what you do now, except not near on that scale. Yeah. So I've climbed all over houses and put up gutters and painted facing, you name it. I've done a lot of that, and I enjoy doing that. But got acquainted with Art, and he just one day said, "Hey, why don't you come over and hang out with me?" And so I started hanging around the radio station and watching what they were doing, and I thought, man,
late 60s.
I really liked this.
Radio was big then, right?
Yeah, it was. And I loved radio. I still love radio. If I were to go back into broadcasting, I'd want to do it in radio because it's so spontaneous. It's just, it's instantaneous. But I hung around enough to realize, man, I'm interested in this. And as luck would have it, or Providence would have it, there was a good school in Kansas City, Radio Engineering Institute, and so I enrolled in that school and went to school and got my broadcast engineer's license, which you had to have.
You had to have them.
Back then. You don't have to have it now. But that was before deregulation. So I actually became a radio engineer. The day after I graduated, the station where Art worked had an opening for an engineer, and I went to work.
What's the odds of that?
Pretty slim. But the rest, as they say, is history. And then I did that for that. It was a chain of stations. I think the headquarters was out of Denver.
What did you do on that station?
Well, I'd climb the towers and fix the lights and change the main transformer and the transmitter. Transmitters was half as big as this room. Just kept the station running. That was my job.
Not to be on the radio.
No. I was started out as an engineer, and did that, and then I decided, I think I'd like to do something a little more creative. Because it was kind of repetitious. You had to go through and you had to keep logs and write down all the numbers and the dials, and it was just
write down
it was repetitious. Everything's pretty well automated now, but it wasn't then. But I decided one day that I would like to try being what they call on-air talent, and so I talked to the general manager, and he didn't take me serious, and because I didn't have a voice for it.
Did you have long hair then?
No, I never was into the long hair. But he didn't take me serious, and so one day, and I had the engineering shift early in the morning, and I would be the only one at that station. And because the morning was automated until the morning, what they call the morning talent came in, the morning DJ, and do all the entertaining and spin the records and all that. And so I look back on it now, and it's amazing I didn't get fired. But I decided that I would do the weather forecast.
Well, see,
so
now
before the regular announcer got there.
On this particular morning.
Yeah, that particular morning, I decided before he got there, I would read the weather forecast, and I did. Unfortunately, one of the general manager's friends was listening and called him and said, "Where did you get that hick that was on the radio this morning doing the weather?" And he knew immediately who it was. He called me in his office, and he read me the riot act, and he said, "Don't you ever do that again." And I didn't. But what I did do, instead of discouraging me, I guess it's something that God put in me, instead of discouraging me, it just made me determined that I would do better.
He ticked you off.
He ticked me off. I guess I got mad.
They say anger is a big motivator.
And so I was fortunate that Kansas City, even today, is one of the best media markets in the United States. They have some of the best announcers and some of the best spoken announcers and best on-air talent that you'll find anywhere. And so I worked early in the morning. I'd get there about 4:30 in the morning. I'd get off about 1. So I'd drive home during the noon or listening to the afternoon drive, and I lived 30 miles away. So I would listen for 30 minutes and listen to these Kansas City guys who were really good. And then I'd go home, and when I'd get home, I'd take a newspaper, and I bought me a little cassette recorder. That's back. Some people don't even know what a cassette recorder is, but I bought a cassette.
And this because you were interested, or you were pissed off?
I was motivated. Yeah, I was motivated.
What motivated you?
He made me mad.
Okay.
and I knew, but I was smart enough to know, with the existing talent that I have, I can't do this. I've got to improve. But I guess I had enough confidence in myself that I could improve. So I would go home and I would get the
news. What gave you that confidence?
I don't know.
Just raised on a farm?
I guess it was hard work, perseverance. My mother, my siblings and I have often, after my dad died, we've often remarked about the perseverance that my mother had. It's amazing in hindsight. And I guess we inherited that from her. Just don't give up. And so I'd get my little cassette recorder, and I'd get home about 1:30 in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, and then I'd go in another room and I'd take that newspaper and I would read the news article just as if I was reading it on the radio. And I'd read it into the cassette recorder and I'd play it back, and I'd let my wife listen to it, and she was a good critic. And I learned how, by doing that, it's just like exercising your arm. You can exercise a muscle until it gets pretty strong. Mm-hmm. Well, I exercised my voice and trained my ear. You can also train your ear until I learned how to do inflection and how to what they call interpret a script so that you can communicate the idea or the information that you're trying to give to somebody that's listening. And I did that.
Is that a form of hypnosis?
No, it's just good talent. It's just good a way to communicate. And in fact, I taught that one semester at Lee, a radio and TV speech, how to interpret a script. Somebody else writes a script, and you have to figure out what's he trying to communicate here, and you have to interpret it that way. And so I did that for a year, over and over, repetitious. And so I auditioned again for the general manager, and before I left that station, I was the morning talent and doing the morning show. And
was the same guy there?
Same guy, and spinning the record.
Did he say, "Boy, you've improved"?
Yeah, he was impressed. And then that same company offered me a promotion and moved me to Wichita to another similar station. And I stayed there. I thought I was going to be there for a long time. Stayed there for 1 year. And then, because I had an engineer's license, I was offered a job in Cleveland with Church of God Communication Center. And I became Church of God Prophecy, rather.
Did they run an ad or what?
No, somehow they knew about me, and their director actually came out to Kansas to talk to me and offer me the job. So that's
wonder how they had heard of you.
I don't know. Well, church circles, and we were attending a church there that somebody knew somebody who knew somebody.
Were you always Church of God?
I was raised Church of God, yeah.
Holy Roller, or is that what they used to call
Well, yeah, Pentecostal.
Pentecostals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I ended up in Cleveland, 1971, October, I believe it was.
And you were already married?
And yeah, had married and had three little boys. They were small. And so I did that for about 15 years and enjoyed every minute of it. It took me around the world, produced a show, a radio and TV show, syndicated on over 400 stations.
Were you doing rock and roll in Wichita?
No, it was easy listening. What
about Kansas?
Same. Wichita and Kansas City.
That was that company.
Yeah. It was easy listening music. I guess that's what they used to say. 92.3 is soft rock, that type of thing. But after about 15 years, I got acquainted with Terry Heaton, who was the news director at Channel 12. And we had similar backgrounds. I was working in religious broadcasting here, and he had been the producer for Pat Robertson at CBN in Virginia, and now he was the news director at CBS in Chattanooga. So we got to be friends, and he asked me if I'd ever thought about doing news, and I said, well, it sounds interesting to me. So next thing I know, I'm the weekend anchor at Channel 12.
So prior to that, you were just playing the songs?
No, that was when I was in Kansas City.
Yeah.
But here, I was producing their syndicated radio and TV show. I was the announcer and the engineer.
So going to Fox News, did you say Fox?
I went to CBS from here in Chattanooga.
That's where my wife used to watch you.
WDEF. And from there, I stayed there until, I forget the year. But anyhow, after that, I was offered, that's when Fox decided to expand into Chattanooga. And they had a standalone affiliate. And the company was Pegasus, I believe, that owned Fox. And they offered me the job as senior anchor and managing editor, and so I stayed there until 2010, I guess, and left. And Broadcasting was very good to me. I enjoyed every minute of it. Well, most every minute of it.
You could still been there, right?
I think I would have. I think I'd have probably made some people mad, and I would have been fired by now. When you look at how much propaganda is on TV.
Was it more news then when you were there?
It was more balanced. Yeah, much more balanced. But I left, and then Gary Davis asked me to be on his staff. Did that for 5 years, and then in 2013 ran for the open seat, and I've been in the legislature 7 years now. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You've had a very interesting career.
Well, I keep trying to find something I can do, you know. But you're right. I've been blessed. My career I figured up the other day, my career has taken me to 27 countries in the world. I've been to Russia when it was communistic. I've been to Chile, Russia in the north and Chile in the south, and several countries in between. It's amazing.
And the reason is because you learned to play the bass?
Reason is, I guess I learned to play the bass and got acquainted with the guy who was in a band and who was in broadcasting. So it's kind of like connecting the dots, you know, and it all, I look back and it all fit together. And it seems like all of my experiences in life have been like stepping stones and preparing me for what I'm doing now. Because I've met people from all walks of life. I mean,
isn't it unusual or isn't it odd that we can connect everything we've done to now? I mean, you very rarely find somebody that's a welder that turns into a banker, or a banker that turns into a welder. It's not really connected.
Mm-hmm. But it is amazing. And of course, I'm a person of faith, but I think what Scripture says, the steps of a good man are ordered of the Lord, and that's the only reason I can figure out why I'm in the legislature, because it certainly wasn't anything this country boy did.
And you didn't think about it?
It wasn't on my radar at all. But here I am, and it's been a rewarding time. I've been able to see some good things done. I've been able to carry some good bills and sponsor some good legislation.
Now the radio came out in what, 1900 or?
The radio.
When the guy first invented the radio. Oh,
the crystal radio was the first. I think it was earlier than that. I believe. I think it was late 1800s. I believe it was. I just saw the guy's name, and I forgot it. That happens when you get old.
Yeah, it was an Italian guy, I think, that invented the. But it wasn't like radio wasn't that mainstream until.
No, it started hitting its heyday, I think, in the mid 30s maybe, and then through the 40s it really was big time. You've seen pictures of, like on the Walton TV show, they'd be sitting around with big case TV. Radios, I mean.
Fireside chats.
Yeah. And so radio was the medium of the day. When TV came along, everybody said radio was going to go away, but it never has, and it never will.
What was that song Van Morrison sung? MTV. MTV killed the radio star. Wasn't there a song by Dire Straits?
I think it was.
So,
and that's not far from wrong. Yeah.
But if you go back to the Waltons when they were sitting around listening, that was what, the 1940s, I guess? Mm-hmm. So
early to mid 40s.
You take 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80, 90, 100, 90 years.
Mm-hmm. And now we got satellite.
And now we got a satellite, and they're doing the Elon Musk is doing the Starlink.
It's incredible.
And I can call you on the phone. Well, I saw you come in from the door chime.
Isn't that amazing?
So and that's in 90 years.
Yeah.
What's next?
Who knows? I was reading this morning, actually I was, about the technology age and how much knowledge has increased in the last 90 years. It doubles now. I think that they said it doubles about every 6 months. That's why these iPhones, they've already got the next 2 or 3 generation of iPhones
I don't even know what they could possibly
They already
do.
know what it's going to. They already know what it's going to do, but if they sold them too quick, they would make everything else obsolete. So they hold them at least a year, maybe 18 months before they release the next
keep them
version.
from breaking.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, my wife needs a new battery right now.
But if we went back to the 1850s until the 1840s to the 1940s, couldn't we sit there then and say technology's changing? I mean, they were pulling.
That was the industrial age, of course. You know, the steel mills and automotive manufacturing and farming, railroads. Farming grew
because
exponentially.
prior in the 1840s they were taking deliveries by teams of horses.
Mm-hmm. And so the tractor, mechanized farming, and it's interesting. I just watched a British TV show called The Wartime Farm, set in the 1940s in Britain during World War II, and it was amazing some of the innovations that came along in the 1940s in farming. And Britain had to mechanize and double production because the Germans were sinking all of their supply boats. Were bringing in, I think 60% of their food to Britain was coming in by boat. And so they were suddenly without any food, and a lot of people would have starved, but the farmers did it. They doubled production.
Do you think that, like you said, the Industrial Revolution or Industrial Age, so there were advances more in that, but maybe less in medicine? Maybe now it's more in, then it became transportation from 1900s to the 1950s, and now it's technology. Maybe the next 90 years is maybe they lay off of that and go more on medical.
I wonder. You know, I've watched a lot of Star Trek episodes.
I have too. Yeah.
And you see that what do they call it? The transporter, where they step under this glass thing.
Teleporter. That's what I think.
And I'm thinking, is that science fiction, or is that really going to happen? Because I think in 1903, the Wright brothers flew that first plane.
12 seconds.
In North Carolina, and now we've had, I don't know how many spaceships on. In 1960s, we
now when they flew the plane, it was is it cold in here to you?
No, I'm fine.
When they flew the plane 12, they said that only 3 newspapers reported it. If that happened today, they'd say, I mean, it'd be all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's how communications changed.
Yeah.
But you know, they're doing that teleportation now with some soft metals. They're actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, they're doing that with some very soft metals. But I don't think they could. Sure, they couldn't. But if you look at everything else on Star Trek, what has not happened?
It's incredible.
So,
like we used to read the old Dick Tracy comics, and they had the watch.
Yeah.
And that's become reality.
That's so reality.
Yeah.
I don't even use it. You know, don't even need it. So I don't know what would be next. I don't know how you could sit down and figure it out.
No.
You know, they say some generations of people advance, like the computer age came out of people just a little bit older than me. And they've actually had studies where they go back and see what generations advanced certain things, and they try to figure out what made them advance that.
Well, I'm amazed at what, we think of ourselves as the enlightened age, but if you've done any reading and study of history, we still haven't figured out how they built the pyramids. They were pretty smart people.
And there's 15 different theories about how they did it.
We don't know.
We don't know.
And any number of things like that. I was watching another British show the other day when they were trying to figure out how they had built these castles that were done in a certain way, and they were trying to replicate it to see if maybe that was the way they had done it. Knowledge is, people have been smart for a long time, decades and centuries,
And you know,
millennial.
like we was talking earlier, some innovations and motivations come through anger, and some come out of necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say necessity is the mother
Mother of invention.
Mother of
Certainly
invention.
is. Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to be next, but here's one thing
It's exciting to figure it out.
here's something that I've wondered. You go back to these old things on YouTube, and it'll say the 1900s in color, and it'll show you pictures, but having color. How do they know what the colors were? Are they just guessing at the colors?
Well, they probably go back and look at the historical records, like the Army would order a certain, if it was a military film, they'd know the Army ordered a certain fabric at a certain color.
But this one was downtown. It said downtown New York in the 1900s, and it showed it in color. And I thought, well, how do they know what the colors were?
I don't know.
Unless there's a way to take a black and white film and know what the color is. But that,
Yeah.
I think they're just guessing, wouldn't you say?
It could be, but some of it probably is not that much different than, if it's downtown, probably not that much different than colors of today. Some of the buildings would be very same.
But when you see those
might not be the exact shade, but be close.
But if you saw downtown New York in the 1900s in color, if they were portrayed as a different colors, it'd have a whole different look.
Probably would.
What else on Star Trek do you think that they could come up with?
I always wonder about the shield. Put up the shields.
Put up the shield, Spock.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, could that really happen?
You know, they said that was such a low budget. You know,
Yeah.
everything was low budget. That one episode, and it was called The Invisible Enemy. One episode, they couldn't even pay actors, so they just claimed that the enemies were invisible.
Yeah.
So, so they didn't have to pay actors; they were just invisible.
There you go. Creative. Fix the budget right
Yeah.
there. I don't know.
Do you think Cleveland is as good as Kansas City? I'm sure you do. You haven't been there. You hadn't been there
Cleveland.
since.
Cleveland's my home. I love Cleveland. Yeah, I go back to Cleveland, Kansas City, as often as possible. I have family there. My brother's still there.
Still there.
My brother-in-law is there. I've got nephews there. My oldest son is there. Yeah, he moved once he got out of school here. He moved back to Kansas City because he's still a cowboy at heart.
What does he do there?
He just retired from the law enforcement. He was the public information officer for the Johnson County Sheriff's Department, which is on the Kansas side of Kansas City. It's a large force with about 500 sworn officers.
Golly, how many we got here?
I'm really not
300
sure. I don't think so.
Not that many.
I don't think so. Sworn
Maybe
officers.
maybe that's just total.
Sworn
employees.
officers for the county, I think, is over 100.
How long does it take to drive to Kansas City?
Depends on who's driving.
9 hours.
I've done it in 10 and a half. It usually takes about 11 and a half, 12. But it's a good drive. I don't go the interstate usually. I take 64. It's 4-lane, nice road.
64.
64 and
That's not this way. That's that way, right?
yeah. If you go over Mont Eagle
Yeah.
and at the foot of Mont Eagle on the other side, you take exit 127. 64 is 4-lane all the way to Memphis. Then you,
That's right. I've gone to
yeah.
Then
you get across the bridge at Memphis and you take I-55. I think it's 55.
that's to Meridian where the casino is.
Yeah, and then you go to Highway 60 at Sykeston, and it's 4-lane all the way to Springfield. And then you take a 4-lane road up to,
You don't make but 3 turns.
that's about it. It's a good road. And I much prefer that, good roads that are the back roads, I prefer that to the interstates. The interstates are so crowded these days.
What's your go-to radio station to listen to?
I usually get up in the morning and listen to whatever Steve's doing on WCLA.
What time's he
Make sure
usually
he's not talking about me,
Yeah.
which he's prone to do. But I get up about 6 o'clock every morning.
Is he already there?
He'll tell you he is, but I doubt it. I'm kidding.
I'd say
Steve.
Dwayne's
I'm kidding,
there.
Steve. Dwayne's there. But when I'm traveling, I need to renew my subscription. When I'm traveling, I like satellite radio because I like to listen to the old-timey classic radio shows. Now, radio in the 40s was kind of like TV is today. They painted a picture without the screen.
Can you say the Lone Ranger intro? From Out of the West.
From Out of the West. No, I can't. I know the song.
Yeah, from Out of the West came the. How does that go?
I don't know. But I love those old radio shows, the comedies especially. Jack Benny, he was funny guy.
He was funny.
And the whole cast of characters he had. Phil Harris, funny guy. And I listen to them now. They're just as fresh now as they were.
Now, when you've seen the movie "Oh Brother, Where Far Art Thou?"
Oh yes,
that's what they were doing, talking into the.
Yeah, I love that movie. That's a good.
But that was exactly the way it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. They'd create their own sound effects, and when you're sitting at home, you're listening to this, and you think you're in the Wild Wild West.
Have you ever seen the movie Seabiscuit?
Yeah, love that movie.
Remember that guy that's in the announcer stand and he's hitting on the stuff, making his own sound effects?
Yeah,
that's probably
that's the way they did it. Yeah, they call it, and they'd give credit to the sound effect man on the radio at the end of the radio show, like Jack Benny. They'd say sound effects by,
because he could make it sound like rain. And
and what I like about it is, especially Jack Benny, he could be funny without being crude or filthy. He just
they can't do that nowadays, can they?
No, to me, comedy today is not funny. It's just.
Now, when you say they could paint a picture,
picture.
You're right. They could do that. There was an ability they had that I don't know if anybody has it anymore.
I tell you, the closest that I hear people come to it is sometimes I'll listen to, not a lot, but I sometimes will listen to NPR, National Public Radio. And they will send somebody on location to do a story, and it'll be a long piece, at least 5 minutes long, about, I don't know, farming techniques in the Sahara in Africa. And they put those sound effects in there, and you can just, in your mind, you can see yourself right there, what they're doing. Because you can hear the chickens, and you can hear the.
Is it other than the sound effects? Is there the way they talk? Does it help to paint the picture too?
Yeah. The writing was different then than it is now. In radio, the writing is different in radio than it is in TV. And we always had to remember that when I was doing news, because the pictures were half the story. So you didn't have to explain everything like you do on radio if you're doing a radio drama.
Because you could say, I don't know. You could go like this, like I don't know. But if you was on the radio, you'd have to say, I don't know, because you couldn't go like this.
Yeah. So the writing is different, and it was a very skilled, Jack Benny, for example, I think he had 5 or 6 writers just for his weekly radio show. So they were talented. They really were.
If you took a radio guy that really knew how to paint a picture with words and put him on TV with the pictures there, would it sound funny, or would it even be better?
No. In fact, I've heard it said by many people, and I believe this: the best training ground for TV is radio. That's what I came out of.
But you wouldn't change when you got to TV.
You change some, but you edit your words carefully. I don't know how many times I've had to edit as a managing editor and senior anchor a new reporter fresh out of college, and I would usually, me or the producer would review their scripts, and you end up taking a script that's that long and reducing it to that because you don't need a lot of words to say something.
On TV.
You just don't need it.
What if you're saying it wouldn't enhance it at all?
You mean enhance?
If you had all those words in there, would it enhance it, or
no? It'd get boring. It'd get boring. People
on
tune
TV.
It out. Yeah, it'd get boring.
Because you already know.
Because you got the picture.
So now you're.
And time is so
expensive, I guess.
Well, if you get 30, 60 seconds to tell a story, That's a luxury. And at the very most, you might get a minute 30 to tell a story. That's called a package.
So you wouldn't put any words that the viewer can see.
Yeah.
That'd be redundant and wasteful.
You throw all the wasted words out.
But it would be good.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's just not economically feasible.
Well, you don't want to bore your audience. You want to communicate well, and time is expensive. So,
Those three things.
Mm-hmm. So,
Do you think people just in general talking have lost communication skills?
I think the cell phone and things like that has,
And text messages?
yeah, the abbreviations, and we don't punctuate and things like that. I think it's hurt a generation.
Why would a person, when I was going to school, you had English class and you learned how to, not to run on sentences and, the 64 prepositions. And how could that be useful today with text? And you said saying, wow, you just say you. Or somebody texted me this morning and said, have a good week. And I said, you too.
Yeah. You
And
too.
too, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I'd have said UK, they'd have known the same thing.
Yeah.
Is communication important? Or did the older generation just make it important?
No, communication's I don't care what you're doing. Communication's extremely important. When I was taught, not full time, they asked me to be an adjunct for one semester at Lee, and I would tell the kids that I don't care if you're selling shoes or pick a profession, or if you're a doctor. If you can't communicate, and the example I would use, and it's a little crude, but I said, okay, you got this guy that you're going to interview as an employee, and you want him to be your salesman for your insurance company. And he walks in and he sounds like Gomer Pyle. Now, I was a fan of Gomer Pyle,
yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but that's not the way you want to communicate. Yeah. And he'll come in and say, well, it's so good to meet you. How y'all doing? And he slaps you on. I said, communication is important. And if you think you're going to get through life without learning how to communicate effectively, then you need to reevaluate what it is you want to do in life, because you have to communicate in order to get along in life. The words that come out of your mouth are the first impression that a stranger gets of you.
You could start a war with the wrong words with the right intent, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So communication's
So English is still good.
Oh yeah, very important. Very important.
You don't think that'll ever lose its luster?
Communication will always be extremely important.
Now, when you say communication, you're talking about the pronunciations and the
knowing how to communicate. I mean, we communicate in a lot of ways.
Like
and not just with our words. We communicate with our body language, with our eyes, with our
posture,
facial expressions, with our posture, and with our hands. You see me doing this. It all comes to play in communication, and we communicate different ideas. We communicate with inflection.
Like, give me an. I mean, like.
Say this bottle of water here. You say, that bottle of water sure is good. That bottle of water is good.
Where's the inflection?
See, you communicated two different ideas, right there, by saying it two different ways.
Just motions.
Yeah, and you put the emphasis.
Do that again.
That bottle of water is good. That bottle of water is good.
That's the same words.
Same words.
But the first time,
different.
You even pointed both times.
Yeah, but it's
different.
Different inflection and different facial expression. Communication is it'll always be important.
Well, I could use that with my wife.
Me too. Me too, Dee.
I get in more trouble. That water's cold or whatever. Well, that is really interesting to me, because here's something else I've wondered. Remember when people used to go on the plane, they'd dress up.
Mm.
And even downtown, you'd see people walking dressed up. and go to church, always wore a tie and looked your best. I don't even wear a tie. I wore this to church, you know. And so if communication is important and inflection, then wouldn't our dress also be as equal important? Would dress be an inflection, or is that what form of communication would be your dress?
I think, well, we live in a different culture today than we did when I was growing up. I was watching, again, my wife and I love these British shows. They have such good writing and such good acting.
You ever watch Basil? You know, the hotel guy?
No.
British comedy?
No, I haven't watched that one. I'll have to look it up. But
It's
there's
hilarious.
a whole list of British stuff that we watch. But I noticed when we were watching that thing about the wartime farm set in the 1940s, the people who would come out to work on the tractors and things like that would be in a suit and tie in the 1940s. And it's just, it's a different mindset today. And of course, you know, I wouldn't recommend
Well,
going
Green
out.
Acres, he always wore
a
suit.
I wouldn't recommend going to work on a tractor in a suit and tie. But there are certain...
Well, back to your point, I remember on didn't they used to come and pump your gas in the car with a towel?
Yeah, they'd have a tie. They'd have on you can trust the star. You can trust your car with the man who wears a star.
That's right.
Texaco.
That's right. Yeah.
Texaco.
Yeah.
They would have a special uniform they wore, but they'd have a tie on underneath with an open collar. And yeah, it was perception that, you know, that we're professionals here.
Is professional is being professional. Looking professional is part of communication.
Part
I
of
guess.
communication. It is. Yeah. If you're going to go interview for a job and you're dressed sloppily and you come in flip-flops and shorts and a t-shirt, you're communicating that I don't really care if I get this job or not.
I noticed the carpenters and brick masons, if the older they are, the more likely they will have their shirt tucked in.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're hot and sweaty, they'll still have their shirts tucked in.
Yeah.
The younger people they might take their shirt off.
Yeah.
But that older guy, he's not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've said this often to people, especially young people coming into the newsroom back when I was doing news. Perception is somebody's reality. I don't mean that the perception is real, but to them, their perception, that is real. So you have to be concerned about what perception you give to people, because if you're trying to communicate a certain idea or a story, be careful about what their perception is of you. And I think it holds true in just about all.
Because that will be their reality.
Yeah, because that's the reality.
Does that get changed?
And a good example of that is we've been conditioned as a society that the perception is that every politician is a crook. The reality is it's just not true.
but it's going to be hard for them to change our initial thinking of that, because that was our initial impression, maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe the news gave that to us.
Yeah. But see, I was always raised, and I still feel this way, I was always raised that public service is an honorable thing, because you're serving your fellow man.
It's like being an usher at church.
Yeah.
It's honorable.
It's an honorable thing to serve. But unfortunately, I'm speaking in generalities now, okay? The general perception is that if you're a public servant, you're a scoundrel. Well, what would we do without the public servants?
You got to have somebody.
Our society would fall apart.
And it's non-productive to just criticize, paint a picture of the whole because of one incident. And that's true in everything.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It can't be productive. We got to have them.
Yeah. And people have asked me, well, how do you change that perception? And I said, well, the only thing that I do is I just try to live in such a way to prove them wrong. That's all I know to do.
Well, maybe it goes back to, let's just imagine somebody that's in the legislature that is maybe got some bad press or something. If you take that same person and you go back and you bring somebody back from the 1930s, he's got a suit, a tie, shirt tucked in, he's got the right posture, presentation, all those things you just said, it would be real hard to think about that guy. Even if you'd heard that news, you'd think, I just don't believe that. He's too polished. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perception.
Perception.
Yeah, perception.
My perception of him is not that.
And I'm glad that we have in the legislature, we have a dress code. We have to dress up in a coat and tie or suit
Maybe
and tie.
somebody's already thought of that.
And it's been that way since the beginning. I mean, we've been a state now 225 years. And it's been that way from the beginning. And of course, the styles have changed, you know.
Well, yeah, how do you how do you get around that?
Well, the styles, you know, maybe a rounded collar, maybe a pointed collar, it may be a button-down collar, it may be it may be a 3-button suit, it may be a 2-button suit. The ties used to be that wide. I've still got a few of those, by the way.
And skinny.
Now there's the skinny, but the style's changed. But the basic foundation is you will dress for the part. You represent the people of Tennessee.
But the people that were on the farm coming to work on the tractors and that British thing you were talking about, they weren't dressed for the part, or were they dressed for the part for that time?
They were dressing for that time, for that era, because they wanted to present the perception to their customers that they were professional people, and they knew what they were doing.
But
Which
now,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I wouldn't recommend working on a tractor in a suit and tie today.
But it might work.
Yeah, and the culture has changed. You know, we perceive things differently. And it's not a rule that you got to dress in the coat and tie.
Maybe
except in the legislature it is.
Maybe that's the idea: is know what is perceived.
And just, you know, the golden rule: considering others, what do they think? How will they perceive you? And let me act accordingly.
And that goes along.
But if we violate the dress code in the legislature, someone comes in without a tie and takes their seat, and they raise their hand to be recognized, they won't be recognized because they violated the dress code. So it's that serious. It's something that we need to respect. It's a matter of respect.
I think that's the bottom line. Now, back when the ice cream people used to wear ties.
They did, bow tie, little black bow tie. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how things have changed.
But if somebody doesn't wear a tie now, it doesn't necessarily.
It doesn't bother me if they don't.
But it's still part of the perception. So maybe we should all. I don't. But you're saying you can still go with the flow of what's in vogue right now, right?
Yeah, styles change. Cultural mores change. You know, take church for instance. A lot of pastors, because personally they respect the fact that they're standing in a pulpit every Sunday delivering the word. To them, they want to show respect by wearing a suit and tie, respect for the word. I've heard some say that. There are others, and I find no fault with them. There are others who decide they're going to dress in a casual shirt and maybe an open collar, or maybe just a sport coat with an open collar shirt because they identify with a younger generation, maybe. I don't know. You know, I don't have a problem with either one of them. I really don't. I know, was it the Apostle Paul says, I became all things to all men that I might indeed influence or win some. So, you know, you just look at the situation and
so
decide.
Paul bent some too.
Yeah.
I guess, right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he sure did. So if it's not a matter of principle and it's a matter of just culture, there's some countries in the world where the men wear kilts. I wouldn't recommend it here, but that's their culture.
If that's their culture,
let them do it.
then and that maybe they would be respectable. So that goes back to what Paul was saying.
He became all things to all men that he might win some. That he became like them so that his influence would not be damaged. Basically, is the way I interpret that. So that he could talk to them about the gospel.
Boy, that's interesting. Did you ever have the Dale Carnegie class?
Never did. Always thought I should.
I took that. It didn't do much good.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Dan, I tell you what, it's been good.
I've enjoyed it.
You got anything you need to add? Want to add?
I don't know what it'd be. I think I've told you my life story.
Well, you're very articulate, and you have a lot of history, but you're very concise in saying it.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's my
that's your
background
radio
history. Oh, there is one thing, and then we'll close with
Yeah.
this, okay? I saw, we was with someone last night. Oh, my wife and I went out to eat, and
Where to?
we went to Cajun Lady, which if you
Oh,
haven't
I've been there. Yeah, it's good.
Oh, I had the Nolan's sampler. Good. But anyhow, Brian Davis, he's the guy that greets you, and he's a veteran. He
Yeah.
served in Desert Storm, and just a good guy, and I've gotten acquainted with him. And so he come to the table, and we was visiting about various things, and I was asking him about his military service, and he asked me about mine, and I've never served in the military. But I've got a bunch of family members that have. And so I started reading off to him all the people that have served in the military in my family. And then I thought about the guy, this is what I'm getting to my point, thought about the guy who's what I call my patriot. I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution. You're familiar with that?
Yeah, George.
Yeah, George is.
Bob George.
Yeah. And so,
I gave a speech there one time.
Did you?
Yeah. Was you there?
Yeah, but to be a member of the SAR, you have to have a patriot who fought against the British, and you have to prove it. It could be a distant cousin, somebody in your lineage that fought against the British. So I was invited to, and I had traced my lineage back for quite a ways, but I never could get there. And so they asked me to join. And so they have a genealogist, and he decided to take it and run with it. And so he found my patriot. And my patriot was on my grandmother's, on the Hooper side, through my grandmother, Nancy Hooper. It was through her side, and going back to the 1700s, and his name is Levin Savage, Levin. And I have a photo of him.
Levin
Savage. And he is buried in Tennessee, and I haven't. He's got to be like a distant cousin of mine, but he is my patriot.
Close enough, right?
We found out for a fact that he fought against the British and the Cherokee Indians. And the Cherokee had aligned with the British, so he fought against the British and the Cherokee Indians in Tennessee on Chilhowie Mountain in Polk County. That's my district.
Yes.
What's the likelihood of that?
What's
Dee?
the odds?
It's amazing.
What are the odds?
I represent Bradley, Polk, and Meigs counties, and when I found that out, I like to fell over.
And
there was
that's from what? That's from McNabb County.
Yeah, going. I don't know McNary.
McNary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's buried. I did follow the trail back and found out he's buried somewhere in North Tennessee, up by the Kentucky line. And I need to go up and pay my respects.
What are the odds of that?
It blew my mind. And so when people ask me to come and speak, I say, well, my lineage in Tennessee started with Levin Savage. And who's that? I said, well, he fought against the British in the 1700s on Chilhowie Mountain in Polk County. And
Fought
here I
against
am.
the British and the Cherokee.
And the Cherokee. And there was a battle on Chilhowie Mountain, if you follow your
Wonder
history.
how long it lasted.
I don't know.
Wonder what year that
It probably was more of a skirmish, I
Yeah.
would imagine. But anyhow, that's my interesting family history.
That is very interesting. The Cajun Lady, it's a good place to eat, isn't it?
Fabulous place.
You ever eat at Lottie's?
All the time.
Yeah.
Cathead biscuits.
When do you eat at Lottie's?
It's been a couple of weeks. course, I'm in Nashville now, so
Yeah.
I can't get up there as often as I'd want.
If you hadn't eaten at the Cajun Ladies and Lottie's, you don't know what we're talking
Oh
about.
yeah,
do you?
your culinary experience is lacking if you've not eaten at
I
Lottie's.
went
and
up
Cajun.
there, the last time I was up there, I had to sit on the porch because they were so crowded.
Yeah,
So I had to sit on the porch. And she came over and said, we're crowded. Can I sit this guy next to you? And I said, fine. And it was Duff Jones. And I went to high school with
No
him.
kidding.
Hadn't seen him since high school.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
almost always see somebody that I know when I go up there. I love going up there. And their service is so good.
They're good, yeah.
And the lady that does the cooking, I can't remember her name. But I always give her a hard time
Oh,
when
it's
I go
that
in.
the Cajun lady is really
It's a real deal.
real deal.
Yeah. She was a trained chef in New Orleans.
Yeah.
I think I pronounced that right. New Orleans?
No, I think you said
Nolans?
Nolans.
Nolans. That's the way they do it. But anyhow, that's my last word. I said I'd end on that. But it's
I
been fun.
appreciate it, Dan.
It's been fun.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate
Oh
it.
yeah, I enjoyed it.